I'm Guillaume Buat-Menard. I'm the Technical Director at TMWEA Marketing Agency. And what I'm going to talk about today is kind of a roundup, or at least my perspective on tech at South by Southwest. First time I went there this year. So basically, I went there without any real goals, particularly trying to find out the different trends and techs, particular products or technology that were out there, but also as a geek. As per this, I don't know if some of you have read this particular blog post from BBH Labs from last year, as all the geeks in us trying to find out what the future will hold, particularly whether it's going to be Skynet or Mad Max. What struck me when I went there is, yes, they would talk a lot of technical trends and 3D printing, Google Glass, and so forth. But actually, throughout the talks I went through, it was mostly about the holistic approach of technology, which was really refreshing. So I went through a lot of tracks and talks that were talking about, not particularly trends of 3D printing, but more about the maker movements. So technology that allows people to make things or design products. It was about hardware being the new software, not particularly technology like Arduinos or Raspberry Pis, but more why they are used for, what do we do with them, and what we can actually produce these days, particularly on Kickstarter, for instance. It was also about rapid prototyping, Internet of Things, so particularly standards that can help design different things. So obviously, there was a big push about 3D printing. It was the opening keynotes, the Brett Pretis from MakerBot that made the opening talks of South by Southwest. And although he presented his MakerBot the year before, this time was about 3D scanning. It was not about 3D printing this year. Obviously, 3D printing had been there for a while. But what was interesting is, if you take 3D printing a year ago, you still needed to be fairly technical, put them together, but also CAD and 3D modeling software. Whereas this year, not only the printers were much better and more accurate and precise, but also they released 3D scanning software that were very easy to use for everybody, so democratizing the medium. There was a bit of talk, I saw some posts actually on the internet about Google Glass winning South by Southwest. I thought that was a bit interesting because being out there, it wasn't talked about so much. There was a big brouhaha about the actual launch of it and the demos of the APIs, but actually people didn't talk so much about the actual Google Glass. It was disruptive, yes, but not a trend over there. Internet of Things actually was a little bit more present. And although it's been around for quite a while now, people have been talking about that a lot. It's starting really to happen, a little bit like 3D printing. Standards are being made. I went to talks from the I3Es, the institute who's making standards for interfaces, for computing interfaces and so forth. And they're starting to design and define those interfaces for machines to talk to one another. It's worth noting as well that those people are focusing on what it can be used for. Internet of Things is not about your fridge tweeting your TV. It's potentially very useful for healthcare, for instance, having all your details or your medical history on a particular chip that will communicate with A&E devices to make a very quick diagnostic. So there are things that actually make sense even commercially and for humanity. Hardware is the new software. We saw in the 90s the software revolution, meta languages, cold fusion, especially in our industry. And I saw some very interesting talks, part of maker movements, aside of the 3D printing movement, which show a similar trend, but in hardware making. When I say hardware, it's not only about the 3D printing of objects, but also the producing of chips and electronic devices, not only particularly with Arduino and such devices, but also ordering chips from computer chips companies at a very, very cheap rate, and without having to order 50,000 units. That makes a big difference when you're trying to make a prototype, and certainly helps a lot of companies on Kickstarter to launch products. I met a guy, 25 years old, launching a Kickstarter product for a joystick, for iPhone and Android joystick. None of them in that startup had any computing engineering degrees. They just learned everything of the internet, learned APIs, and got going. That's pretty impressive. And then there was Stephen Wolfram. Now, this is for the more geeky people, and certainly me. This guy, he's basically quite a legend in the computing industry. And his talk on the future of computing was outstanding. He really, this talk hit me really hard. For those who know me, I was actually speechless for a little while, which is quite a feat. And this guy basically is a visionary and is trying to explain what he's actually researching. So what this guy is doing several things. First of all, he's a scientist. And what he's doing is, first of all, he's working on what he calls computer equivalence. It's actually a principle released by Turing originally, which basically, you can read this. I didn't understand it either. What it means is he's saying that everything, all systems, brain, weather systems, actually are made of computing parts that compute very simple computations, if you wish. And what he's trying to do in his research is actually create small programs, unit programs that can mimic processes from the natural world. Basically, this guy is decompiling life. This is pretty powerful for what he's trying to do with his other products. So this is his research. This is not his product. Wolfram Alpha, most of you must have heard of that, those at least interested in search engines. That was launched about a couple of years ago, I think. It's becoming very mature now. What this guy is releasing is not a search engine, but a computational engine. If you imagine Google, Google matches your query. So basically, you search for Facebook versus Twitter users, it will match your queries, try and find maybe a blog post written about that. What this search engine does, you can try on your mobile. If you enter in that search engine, or that computational engine, Facebook versus Twitter, it'll graph you the actual differences and over time between those user growth. He understands what you want, computes it, and also actually tries to find out what you want next, give you more options and graphs. Very powerful stuff. And on top of that, so this has been launched a few years ago, it's very, very mature now, and he's launching a meta language, a bit like meta web languages, that will draw from that tool to allow people to create algorithms without knowing computing. His kid, the 13-year-old kid, was creating algorithms with his tool. Very, very powerful. This basically means he's democratizing data analysis. So what I've been looking at is looking at all these talks. I was thinking, what about our industry? Maybe I was thinking marketing, not particularly engineering especially. So software was democratized in the 90s, lots of meta languages, very easily for everyone to learn programming the web. Hardware is the new software now. Product design is democratized with 3D printing. Data analysis is democratized by that guy. So everything is easy for everyone to make. So I thought, what does it mean for us, for the techies? Not the techies in the companies that make chips and so forth, but maybe more marketing, building websites and apps. It means we're going back away from specializing. Late 90s, 2000s and so forth, we had a bit of the web editors, people knew a bit of everything. Then we specialized, Flash and HTML and JavaScript and so forth. Now everything is becoming easier. We can actually have the need for more creative technologists that we've seen, more generalists that know a bit of everything. And this is making life a lot easier for them. What does it mean for the brands and agencies that are actually dealing with those technologies? Well, it means to embrace this movement. Some brands are already doing it. Ford is releasing APIs for its cars. You can plug in your iPhone and get out data from it. Campbell is creating Hack the Kitchen events. And Cadbury's is sponsoring Hack Days. Don't do an Napster. Embrace the IP issues that 3D printing might throw at you. Give away CAD designs for kids and so forth so they can print them on their printer if they have. And make things. Do Hack Days. Make stuff. Buy a printer, Arduino boards, and make stuff. Also, recruit adequately. I'm sure you would have a lot to say about that, B. But basically, it's more difficult, but more, I guess, more exciting. You can't recruit just a JavaScript developer anymore. You have to have people with interest. You were talking about passion for things, to making things. Arduinos, a bit of electronics, or that might be 3D printing or product design. I think we need more people like that now. So, my bet is Skynet. Thank you.